Vienna, 1885. Just as the smoke of the forges curled over Favoriton's narrow alleys and the Habsburg banners snapped in the spring wind, the clang of hammer on steel echoed through the yard behind the forge, sharp and steady. Ashen-faced with soot and silent as always, August Weller tightened the grip on the glowing blade he shaped. He preferred the heat and rhythm of his work to words. The world was full of noise, politics, orders, gossip, but he heard none of it. Born without a voice, August let fire and iron speak for him. His forge, tucked in the working-class district just beyond Schönbrun's manicured walls, was not meant for noble feet. That morning, however, a carriage halted outside his shop, its driver hesitating before knocking. August opened the door and found not a noble woman, but a girl in a plain brown cloak, her gloves stitched at the fingers, her boots dusted from travel. Her eyes, gray and alert, studied him. "I need a blade," she said. "Not for show, for use." She held out a folded letter sealed with wax, marked with the crest of the deposed Kingdom of Montenegro. He didn't need to read it. The sword was for her. August nodded once and gestured her inside. She stepped in, removing her cloak. Beneath it, a faded riding dress clung to her narrow frame, the hem torn. Her back straightened as she met his gaze. "I'm Theodora Elwood," she said. "I was a princess. Now I'm just wanted." He raised an eyebrow. "My uncle handed over our kingdom to the Austrians for a title. My brother died trying to stop him. They call me Exiled, but they mean hunted." She looked at the lined leather apron around his chest. "You don't talk." He shook his head. "Good," she said. "I've had enough lies." August gave her a slate and chalk, which she took without question. She scribbled, then turned it to him. "I need a blade I can carry under my coat. Light fast. I may have to duel." He nodded again, then turned to his tools. She stayed, leaning against the doorway, watching as he selected steel and began the process. Her gaze never wandered from his hands. Theodora returned each day after dusk, when the streets grew quiet and the gas lamps flickered low. She brought bread and cheese, and once, a bottle of plum rakhija she'd hidden in her satchel. August accepted it with a grateful nod, the corner of his mouth lifting not quite a smile, but close. She moved like someone trained to vanish. Her steps were careful, her shoulders always tense. She didn't speak of her past again, but August noticed the way she flinched at the sound of horses, the way she refused to sit with her back to the door. One evening, as he cooled the nearly finished blade, she reached out and touched his wrist. He stilled. "You could have turned me in," she said. "I saw the posters. You know who I am." He met her eyes and shook his head slowly. Then, with a piece of chalk, he wrote, "I know what you are not." She blinked. "And what's that?" He hesitated, then wrote, "A traitor." Her breath caught. She looked away, embarrassed by the tears that rose so quickly. "You're wrong," she murmured. "I ran when I should have stayed." August reached beneath the bench and pulled out a bundle. He unwrapped it to reveal the finished blade, sleek, curved, the hilt wrapped in dark leather. He handed it to her. She weighed it carefully, tested the balance. "Perfect." He passed her another slate. "Do you know how to use it?" "I was taught," she said, "but I need to be better." He tapped his chest, then pointed to the yard. "You train me?" He nodded. She slipped the coat off her shoulders and followed him outside. Over the next week, steel rang in the yard long after sunset. Theodora moved with growing precision. August corrected her silently, adjusting her posture with a light touch to her elbow or shoulder. She learned quickly, watching his feet more than his hands. They never spoke during training. One night rain began to fall, sudden and hard. She stepped back, breathless, hair-soaked, and laughed. It was the first time he heard her laugh, a real one, not bitter or forced. She tilted her head up to the sky, then looked at him, eyes bright. "You don't seem to mind the rain." He took off his coat and held it over her head. She hesitated, then stepped close beneath it, both of them standing shoulder to shoulder under the thin wool. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. He didn't write anything, just looked at her. When she turned to face him, their noses nearly touched. Neither moved. The silence stretched between them, thick as the clouds above. Then she whispered, "They'll come for me. Maybe tomorrow." He nodded once, solemn. "I won't run again," she said. "If there's a duel, I'll face it." "You won't face it alone," he wrote. She stared at the words a long time, her lips parted. Then she reached out and took his hand. They came at dawn, just as the bell from the nearby church began to toll. 3 men on horseback, dressed plain, but August saw the blades beneath their coats. Theodora stood in the yard, sword at her side. August stood behind her, hammer in hand. The lead rider dismounted. "Lady Theodora," he called, "your uncle wishes to speak. You'll come quietly." "I challenge you," she said, "as is my right. You took my brother's life. You won't take mine without blades drawn." The man laughed, but drew his sword. August stepped forward, but she held out a hand. "Let me," she said. The duel was fast. August had trained her well. She used her size, her speed. The man underestimated her, and within minutes, she had his blade at his throat. She didn't kill him. "Tell my uncle I won't be hunted," she said. "Tell him I have allies now." The man spat, but withdrew. The other riders followed. When they were gone, she turned to August, shaking. "I didn't kill him," she whispered. "I thought I would." August took her hand again and pressed it to his chest. His heart pounded. She closed her eyes and leaned into him. That night, she didn't leave. She stayed in the back room of the forge, curled beneath a wool blanket, while August worked late into the dark. Neither said much, but when he handed her a cup of tea, her fingers brushed his and lingered. "I don't have a kingdom anymore," she said. "I only have what I carry." August wrote, "You carry courage. That's more than most kings." She smiled. "And you? What do you carry?" He paused, then wrote, "You." He didn't mean it lightly. That much she knew. She reached up and touched his face, gently, cheek smeared with soot, eyes bright. "Then I'll stay," she whispered. "If you'll let me." He answered by taking her hand again, and this time, not letting go. The frost came early that year. By the middle of October, a thin crust of ice had crept along the rain barrels and settled in the cracks of the courtyard stones. Theodora woke under a coarse wool blanket in the forge's back room, her breath a faint cloud in the morning chill. August had already risen. She could hear him in the yard, the slow scrape of coal being shoveled into the brazier. She wrapped her coat tighter and stepped outside. He was tending the fire, sleeves rolled, steam rising from his shoulders as he worked. She watched him for a moment before stepping forward. "The chimney needs sweeping," she said, nodding toward the blackened bricks. "I can do it." He didn't object. She fetched the brush and climbed the ladder herself, boots slick on the rungs. From the rooftop, Vienna stretched in every direction, white plumes from bakeries, smoke from the weaving mills, the copper dome of the Karlskirche catching the dawn. When she climbed down again, soot streaked her face, and her hands were blistered. August met her with a tin of balm, unscented and thick. She took it without a word. Inside, they shared a breakfast of rye bread and boiled eggs. She ate cross-legged on the floor while he mended a broken hinge. He glanced at her once, then reached into the drawer and set something beside her. A book, worn leather cover, no title. She opened it. Blank pages. A pencil lay tucked inside. "For me?" she asked. He nodded. She didn't write in it at first. She leafed through, then pressed her palm flat against the first page. "I used to keep journals," she said, "but they were seized with everything else." August returned to his work, but she could feel him listening. "They burned my letters. Said they were treasonous. Even the ones from my brother, from when we were children." She closed the book gently. "Some things you carry in your body so long, you forget they were once words." That evening, he led her down a narrow lane she hadn't yet noticed, past shuttered bakeries and a locksmith shop. They entered a stone building without a sign, where a man with a thick beard and ink-stained hands nodded in greeting. The place smelled of parchment and iron gall. Inside, half a dozen typesetters worked in silence. August handed the man a folded page. Theodora stood back, uncertain, until he gestured to a small press in the corner. The man handed her a proof sheet. Her eyes scanned its slowly Montenegrin script, carefully typeset. Her brother's words, from a public address he had delivered the year before his death. She looked to August, stunned. "You kept this." He pointed to the bottom of the page, where her own translation was printed beside the original. "You're publishing it." He nodded once. She folded the sheet carefully. He said, "We are not the soil we defend, but the spirit that rises when it's taken from us." She pressed the page to her chest. "I thought those words were lost." They walked back under low clouds, the cold settling deeper into the stones. She slipped her hand into his. He didn't pull away. Later, as they sat before the forge's embers. She opened the blank book and began to write not about the war or the loss, but about the way the city looked from the roof, the way August's hands moved when he wasn't thinking about them, the way it felt to be remembered without being asked to speak. She glanced up. He was watching her, as if memorizing the curve of her face in the firelight. "I'm not going back," she said. "Even if I could. Montenegro belongs to ghosts now." August picked up the slate and wrote carefully, "Then stay where you are seen." She touched the place where her exile badge had once been sewn into her coat sleeve. Then she looked to the blade resting above the hearth, its edge clean and silent. "I won't carry it forever." "You won't have to," he wrote. When she leaned against his shoulder that night, it was not because she was tired, but because she no longer feared being still. The first snow settled on the forge roof in a hush. It softened the chipped stones of the courtyard and buried the rusted hinges of the gate until only their outlines remained. Inside, the warmth from the hearth kept the frost at bay, but the cold still crept beneath the doors and into the joints of the floorboards. Theodora sat at the workbench beneath the narrow window, a strip of linen wound around her palm. She had cut it on a splinter in the storage shed. August poured boiled wine into a mug and set it beside her, then eased onto the stool opposite. His sleeves were rolled past his elbows, red marks at his wrists from where the gloves had rubbed through the day's work. "You should wear thicker linings," Theodora said quietly. "You'll ruin your joints before spring." He tilted his head slightly, a familiar gesture mock skepticism, mild amusement. She narrowed her eyes at him. "I mean it. I know you think you're made of iron, but you're not." He reached for a scrap of parchment from the shelf and wrote with the charcoal stub, "I'm not the one bleeding." She laughed, but it was short-lived. "It's nothing. I barely felt it." Still, he reached across the table and unwound the linen himself, inspecting the shallow cut. Then he dipped a cloth into the mug and pressed the warm wine to her skin. She inhaled sharply but didn't pull away. "You always use wine? Seems a waste." He looked up at her. She caught the faint crease at the corner of his eyes, something unreadable but steady. "I suppose it's fitting," she said. "We've bled enough for old men with crowns. Might as well use their drink for something useful." He wrapped her hand again, slower this time, then left the knot loose enough for her to remove later. When he finished, she didn't withdraw. Her hand remained beneath his. "I've been thinking," she said, eyes lowered, "about the press, about what we could do with it. There are other exiles in the city, former officers, teachers, even a few poets. They meet in secret above a bakery near the canal. I could bring them a copy of my brother's words. And others, new ones." August let go of her hand and stood. He opened the drawer beneath the bench and pulled out a folded cloth bundle, then unwrapped it carefully. Inside were 3 fresh typesetting plates, etched and inked but unused. He passed them to her. She studied them. "You've already started?" He nodded. "Why didn't you say anything?" He wrote, "You weren't ready before." She traced her thumb along the edge of one plate. "I'm ready now." That night, she left the forge with the bundle tucked beneath her coat. The streets were quiet, the snow crunching beneath her boots. August watched her from the doorway until she turned the corner and disappeared behind the millworks. She returned just before dawn, her cheeks flushed from the cold, her scarf damp with melted snow. He was still awake, seated at the bench, sharpening a chisel. When she entered, she dropped a small, cloth-bound book onto the table. "They want more," she said. "Not just old speeches or manifestos. Stories, letters, names of those who were silenced." He nodded once, then turned back to his work. She hesitated. "They offer me a place. A hidden room beneath the old counting house. I could help organize, distribute." He paused, then met her gaze. "I told them I was staying here." His eyes searched hers. "I meant it." He crossed the room, pulled the stove door open, and stoked the embers with a fresh log. The glow lit the side of his face, the scar near his jaw more visible in the flicker. She stepped closer, then rested her head against his back. Neither of them spoke. The kind of silence that passed between them had never been empty. When she finally drew back, she looked up at him, her voice quieter than before. "I'm not hiding anymore. Not from them. Not from this. If you ask me to stay, I will. But not in the shadows." He took a long breath, then reached for the chalk. His hand hovered above the slate for a moment before he wrote, "You were never in the shadows. You lit mine." She blinked once, then reached up and touched the collar of his linen shirt. fingers resting just near the hollow of his throat. I want to build something, not just survive it. You understand? He nodded. Then let's begin with this place. Her eyes turned to the cluttered forge, the cracked windows, the soot-stained walls. We'll need more light, a proper press, and paper, so much paper. He picked up his coat and handed her hers. They stepped outside together, the snow deeper now, untouched. The bell from the cathedral tower rang once in the distant morning. She reached for his hand, gloved now, warm from the fire. Come with me, she said. We'll speak to the paper merchant on Colmart. We'll pay in steel if we have to. He nodded, locking the door behind them. They walked side by side through the stillness, their footprints the only ones marking the path. The winter market had begun to crowd the square by the old rot house, stalls pressed shoulder to shoulder beneath garlands of dried oranges and pine boughs. Theodora moved slowly between the vendors, the press of bodies unfamiliar after so many nights within stone and iron. Her wool cloak had been patched at the elbow, but it covered her well enough, and no one glanced twice at her face. August walked beside her, a wrapped ledger beneath his arm. They had come for paper, ink, and binding twine, but she paused often, once to study a bolt of indigo-dyed cloth, once to sniff at a stack of beeswax tapers that reminded her of the monastery south of Sedanya. He let her wander, his presence steady, eyes always watching the edges of the crowd. A boy with frostbitten cheeks called out prices for goose feathers. A woman baked chestnuts over a coal fire in a barrel cut in half. It was a world Theodora had not touched since the days before her father's arrest, before her name had become a tool for men who had never knelt to the soil of her homeland. Do you remember the scent of your own mountains? She asked him quietly, not turning her head. He glanced toward her. I know you're not from here, she continued. Your tools are weighted differently. The way you temper the steel, I've only seen that in the Balkans. You don't wear it on your face, but I see it in your hands. He didn't deny it. Instead, he reached into the ledger and pulled free a folded parchment. He passed it to her. She unfolded it. A sketched charcoal, rough but clear. Hills thick with pine, a narrow river cutting through them. A forge tucked beside a wooden house. 2 goats in the corner, lazily drawn. You never told me you could draw. He took the parchment back and tucked it away again, then raised an eyebrow. I never asked, she said. Fair enough. They bought what they needed from a bookseller with heavy eyelids and a birthmark like a teardrop on his neck. Theodora paid in silver buttons from an old riding coat she no longer wore. The seller didn't ask questions. Walking back through the narrower streets, she studied the way the snow melted faster on the rooftops of bakeries and the dye house, how the windows near the weaving halls glowed faintly even in daylight. Her thoughts had grown heavier in the past weeks, not with fear, but with direction. I met a woman yesterday, she said as they crossed the canal bridge. She's part of the workers' school near the rail station. They print pamphlets, yes, but they also teach children. Immigrants, mostly. The ones born between tongues. August looked at her, the question already in his eyes. I want to help them. Not just through paper and ink. I can read 5 languages I could teach. Translate. They have a room, but no one steady to lead it. They said I'm welcome if I don't mind the cold. He stopped walking. She turned back to him. I wouldn't leave the forge. It would only be for a few hours each morning. He touched the edge of the ledger, thoughtful. You think I need your permission? He shook his head. But you want to make sure I'll be safe. A short nod. I will be. I'm not hiding behind your walls, August. I'm standing beside them. At home, she placed the paper and twine in the press drawer, sorted the ink bottles by consistency, and scraped the last of the wax from the binding trough. When she straightened, he was watching her again, not with worry, but with a kind of quiet awe, as if she had continued growing even while he slept. Will you come with me tomorrow? She asked. To the school. He hesitated, then stilled her hand where it brushed the edge of the work table. He kissed her knuckles soft, deliberate, then let them go. That night, she lay close enough to hear his heartbeat and traced her thumb along the curve of his ribcage, counting the years he must have carried that silence. He placed her hand over his chest, and they stayed that way until the last ember in the stove dimmed to ash.